Yeah, my poster fell down, so hopefully I'll have that up for the next review. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Expendables. Now, this was a movie I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of just about everybody involved in this movie, and most of all these people are coming together into one big action fest. And The Expendables doesn't disappoint in that regard. It's not a great movie, it's not really a good movie, but it definitely delivers in what it wants to be, which is always how I approach watching movies. I always try to base what they're trying to be and how well they accomplish it. And in that regards, like I said, Expendables is awesome. It's not perfect, but it's awesome. The thing you just have to remember here is that everything that exists in this movie is just an excuse for more action. Storyline, it's just there for action. Character development, action. Relationships, more action. Everything just is just an excuse for more action sequences. But what makes this really work is I think Stallone is a surprisingly good action director. You know, I think people have gotten too used to the movies of Michael Bay and Roland Emmerich, and I'm actually a fan of both of those people and for what they're trying to do. But this is a much more down-to-earth, gritty, hardcore, and extreme action fest. And I always thought that Stallone's gift was that he was able to make action sequences that you could tell what's going on, you could feel all the intensity, and it just looks great. It looks not like Tarantino stylized, but it looks stylized in its gritty and realistic way. And actually, this is why I don't believe The Expendables is a throwback to 80s action films, like everybody keeps saying. For me, an 80s action film is something along the lines of Commando, Rambo 2, or Rambo 3. It's more along the lines of a shirtless, oiled-up badass with a giant gun blowing up an entire army while no bullet hits him for some reason, in slow motion as he spews out cheesy-ass one-liners. There were movies that became almost hard to take seriously, and that's, I think, where they ended up going downhill. I think actually the movie that killed it was Batman and Robin, because after that, we didn't want movies that didn't take themselves seriously anymore. But this isn't like that. It's much more like Stallone's previous Rambo movie. It's very dark, very brutal, incredibly hardcore, and most of all, it takes itself pretty seriously. And even though some people actually have said that it's a cheesy action film, I don't see where the cheese is. I mean, yeah, it's a little exaggerated, but it's still fairly down-to-earth compared to what the 80s action films were, and I can't think of one scene directly that I thought was cheesy. It's not quite as dark and depressing as Rambo, but at the same time, it's less focused. Rambo was it was one of the most depressing action films I've ever seen. Very gory and very brutal, and it never really let up on that. In the case of The Expendables, it has a few more lighthearted moments, but at the same time, the backlash of this is it just loses the track sometimes. Certain scenes just don't really feel relevant to the overall plot. Like, for example, the whole Jason Statham girlfriend subplot. It really goes nowhere. It just kind of, I guess it's supposed to be a little bit adding to the theme of the movie, how these guys, they have really no lives outside of being an expendable. And any attempt to otherwise will just end up in misery. But they don't follow through with that enough for it to make it seem relevant. It ends up being pretty cool. I mean, I liked it when Jason Statham beat up the abusive boyfriend. But, and even the scene with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis, it has no relevance to the plot. But it is very funny and very cool. The problem I have with that is that I don't know how they could have done this, but it doesn't seem like they always got Bruce Willis in the same shot with them. I mean, for all I knew, Bruce Willis could have only been there for one little shot between the three of them, and the rest of the time he was shooting somewhere else. It reminded me of Christian Bale and Johnny Depp in Public Enemies, where it doesn't seem like you ever see them actually in the same shot together. But otherwise, I thought that was really fun. I'm trying to think who stood out for me the most. Stallone, he's a good actor in what he tries to do. I read somewhere, on a website, this great comment where he's not a bad actor like everybody says. He's just a limited actor. But within those limitations, he's really good. or he can be good if he is the right director. But he directs himself really well. And there was no bad moments. He was pretty intense. He doesn't take himself seriously, which is what I like about him. You know, he is an old guy who gets beat up a lot in this movie. Jason Statham, he's always Jason Statham, but he's always really cool. And my problem with Jason Statham is I think he's horrible when it comes to choosing projects. With the exception of The Bank Job, I can't think of one great Jason Statham movie right now. Plenty of fun and entertaining movies, but I was never really all that big on The Transporter or War. I thought they were all okay movies, but that's it. I think he's just one of those guys who just will do anything for a paycheck. When you do an Uwe Boll movie, in this case it was In the Name of the King, you obviously don't care. But he does good, typical Jason Statham role. Jet Li surprised me just because I expected a smaller role. I expected him to be the badass silent type, but here he actually has some funny moments. And I actually like how this movie handles the depth these characters have. Jet Li's character is insecure about his height, but they never actually have him say that. He's just complaining about how he needs more money because he's always has to do more because he's smaller. And that, I think, was a nice revelation on the character. And I always like subtle hints of depth. That's, to me, the best kind of depth. And oddly, he gets his ass kicked a lot in this movie. But in a way, it makes sense, because he fights characters who are just as badass as him, but definitely bigger. And in real life, usually the bigger person's going to win. But he does very good in these fights. Dolph Lundgren actually stole the show for me. He's always been a supporting character. You always see him in his biggest roles, I think, as a Universal Soldier in Rocky IV. And he was the heavy in both of those. And now he's become a direct-to-DVD star, and he's the lead in those. And he's actually a decent actor, and his movies are actually okay for direct-to-DVD movies. They're better than Seagal's, at least. Not quite as good as Van Damme's. But here he's actually really funny, really interesting, and I just love seeing him on the big screen again. And that was great. He played that really well. Nobody else really stands out. Eric Roberts gets to play a more evil version of his role from The Dark Knight. Terry Crews and Randy Couture have one memorable scene each, but they don't really do a whole lot. They could have been played by anybody, and Steve Austin the same way. But everybody plays their parts well enough, and they're interesting to the point where I was interested in watching them. I was thinking, actually, what is this movie's biggest fault? For me, it's the hand-to-hand fight scenes. Like, Dolph Lundgren fights Jet Li at one point. I always like it when you see two fairly well-known people fight. Like, I even got all excited when Jet Li fought Mark Dacascos and Cradle to the Grave. But here, they have a really good fight, but I don't think the camera always did it justice. It's all shaky and blurry, and I don't get why it's that way, when it wasn't necessarily that way in the other action scenes. It's almost like Stallone doesn't really know how to direct an actual fight scene. And that's kind of a shame. I thought that sort of took away from that fight. And it also made the hand-to-hand combat scenes just really confusing at times. I couldn't tell who was who occasionally, and it got kind of convoluted. But other than that, I thought it was almost a perfect action film. It is what it is. That's all. If you don't like those kind of action movies, don't watch it. It's not for you. But if you do like those kind of action movies, you've probably already seen it. But if you haven't, you should definitely check it out. If you want to watch or read my full review, my written review, just check the link in my description. That's all, and this week I should have another Critiquing the Critics episode. See ya.